Hello, Rory.
Hello, Dean, if that is your real name.
It is indeed. For tonight, anyway.
For tonight,
How are
we're
you?
here live and in danger with Dean Zachary.
That's right. That's right. Professional comic book artist and provocateur.
Provocateur, yeah, I'll say.
What would you like to ask? Just start firing away. I'll do my best to answer, my friend.
Okay, where were you last Thursday?
Well, you have to talk to my attorney about that. But for
okay.
all you know, I was here at home in the studio working diligently on my next creative project.
That's right, in the studio.
In the studio. Although there are many bars named the Studio, so you never know.
Right. I got a good friend when I was stationed in Buffalo. We found a bar called the Library.
Oh yeah, it's great, right? There's one in town.
Made the hell out of that.
Actually called The Office. I'm not joking.
Perfect.
It's a bar called The Office. It's pretty funny.
Back up in Cleveland, there was a hospital across the street. There was a bar called The Emergency Room.
Oh no! Stop. Really? And now I'm sure there are plenty that are called, like Bible study, therapy.
Yeah.
Who knows, right? It's just
absolutely
all sorts of smoke and mirrors. My specialty.
I love it.
Just kidding.
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. So
you do look like
here?
Well, we're here because you look like a young James Bond.
Well,
and I thought you were interesting.
Well, thank you. Well, I appreciate that. I am married. They are casting for Bond. Way too old, and but that being said, I do have a recommendation for those guys.
Please,
I think Henry Cavill would be a tremendously good
yes,
for James
Bond. I think he would be great.
Yes, and
Catholic,
Oh yeah. Didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Did not know that. I thought he did a great job as Superman, and a lot of people, have differing opinions on the Zack Snyderverse and whatnot. But he also did a great job as a spy in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. So hey,
it did that. What a great movie that was.
Oh yeah.
I thought what a good redo of that TV show.
Yeah,
to put it into like one movie content kind of thing.
Well, yeah, and also just him playing an American spy was kind of cool. Him being a Brit.
Yeah,
everything he pulled it off quite well. So anyway, my recommendation would be to the broccoli.
Yeah, absolutely, I second that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, let's say, what was your first foray into the comic world?
Well, my first foray into full color superhero comics was The Ferret, which was a Malibu publication. And that came about because the editor of the book happened to walk in as I was making copies of sample pages in one of those copying places, like it was like Kinko's back then. I think now they're called FedEx office. But I was making copies to send in. It was like Spider-Man pages or something. He's, hey, are those your pages? I was like, yeah. And he's like, you're trying to be a comic artist? Like, yeah. It's like, actually, I just got hired to be an editor. I'm going out to Malibu, to edit. Can I take these with me? I'm like, sure. And so one thing leads to another, and I get an assignment to do the Ferret, which was kind of a fun spoof almost of Wolverine. But it did have the unique quality of having the very first die cut comic book cover, which is interesting. If you go,
what is die cut?
Yeah, go to Comic Vine, Dean Zachary, and it's one of the covers that they feature there, and it's a die cut face. It's close up of the character's face, looking all mean and tough, with a little bit of blood at the corner of the mouth after a big fight, as they always are. And they actually die cut the edges, which made it kind of unique, and that's still a collectible, as a matter of fact.
So what does die cut mean?
Oh, it just means that when they went to print it, the printer actually had to cut the edges to form an irregular shape around the edges of the
Oh, okay.
so it's irregularly shaped. And
Got it.
you've seen specialty covers, whether they're embossed, which means the image is raised a bit, or there's a spot varnish, which means there's a
Mm,
shiny area to the piece. Whatever, this happened to be die cut. So again, a
okay.
contour shape of the face around the cover. So it's interesting. So look that up on the internet, and you'll find it. Just put the ferret
Yeah,
number.
yeah. So the ferret,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
the
pretty funny.
ferret, Dean Zachary.
Yeah, my influences before I got started were really like John Byrne, Neil Adams,
Mhm.
Gil Kane, John Romita, Jim Lee really inspired me at the time, because we were talking about the late '80s, and I really liked the energy and dynamics, because he had the same sort of hyper I guess superhero realism that we'd come to see in the silver bronze age, I should say.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the Batman material that we were seeing in the late '70s and then in the '80s, it was getting that Neil Adams realism, and then he amped it up even more when he was drawing the X-Men. I think most people are familiar with him around the 290s to probably 270s to 290s of Uncanny X-Men, and then he went on to do his own
Yep.
X-Men
That
#1,
was
and then the
huge.
rest is history when he went to do Wildcats at Image and all that. But that was a huge inspiration for me, because at the time it was it was mainly just Marvel and DC, and the
Mhm.
Image guys were the first sort of artistic rogues that were stepping out to say, hey, look, it's the art. And the publishers were like, no, it's the character. We all know it's a combination of both, but
Yeah.
they sort of
Yep.
put their money where their mouth was and went off on their own in the early '90s to prove that their art could do it. And so we got Spawn from Todd McFarlane,
Yep.
and the rest is history. Spawn became a legend and is still around today. A movie was made in the late '90s, and then there's another movie in progress right
A
now.
movie. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I also was into not just comics but also film, and so
Yeah.
my huge influences in that were Ridley Scott, probably.
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. Yeah.
In terms of just the
Oh, yeah.
saturation.
Yeah. How much of a crossover? Yeah. Because that would be huge. The huge crossover between
Oh,
Ridley Scott
oh yeah,
and
because
comics.
well, I love the fact that he took so much time to really paint a picture. So you had
Mhm.
texture, you had atmosphere, you had, you know,
Oh, yeah.
rain or smoke or some sort of environment that really decorated the image.
Ooh,
It
good
wasn't
word.
clean. It was filled with, smoke or a
Yeah.
siren going off. I remember a specific scene in the first
Debris.
Debris,
Yeah.
the first Alien, where Ripley is being hunted at the end of the first movie, and she's literally
Yeah.
trying to make it back to her escape pod and the
Mhm.
shuttle. And there's a shot from the floor, and she's coming up out of the floor, and you've got the warning, the voice going, you've got sirens spinning,
Yes.
you've got steam, you can see, I mean, the scope he's using, the lens he's using, you can see the
Mhm.
bubbles of perspiration on her face as she's coming up out of the floor to look for the alien. She's terrified. And I just
Mhm.
remember, this guy's painting this. This is just every frame could be, you could freeze frame
Yeah.
it, and it was a piece of art. So I
Yeah.
wanted
Who
to.
coined somebody coined that every frame a piece of art, or every frame a picture or poster.
It,
Somebody said something.
somebody did say that, but I mean, in terms of just the meticulous nature of his vision, and he took the time to
Yeah.
make it work. A lot of it was he didn't have a huge budget, so he had to shoot a lot of smoke machine, rain, dark shots
Mhm.
to kind of get
Yep.
around that. Then of course later when he became the name that he was, you know, he could command the budgets that he needed to tell the stories he needed to tell
Right.
visually. Hence you get things like, you know, Kingdom of Heaven, which is again saturated.
Oh yeah, amazing.
A Gladiator.
Yeah, Glider.
But yeah, so film influenced me a lot. So sequential
Okay.
storytelling was a natural way for me to express myself artistically. And I always thought in cinematic terms when I would draw, but that seemed to work well with the scripts I was getting. And so I always tried to keep in mind, okay, let's balance these panels, right? So you're going to have your establishing shot, your close up, a medium shot, maybe a silhouette.
Right.
And I'd always try to keep it where it was 5 panels per page. And so I remember my editor was impressed with the fact that I did thumbnails. And we've talked about this before when we talk about process. I get pretty detailed in my thumbnails, which are just small layout sketches of what the pages are going to be, because I want to establish lighting. I want to establish storytelling. I want to establish the Z shape of eye movement through the page, you know, upper left.
Yeah, Z shape. I was going to
Z
say.
shape, then across, and then exit at the lower right. But I recommend it to people who ask me about drawing comics for the first time. I'm always like, well, keep the Z shape in mind for eye movement. Always do layouts. Always try to decide what your light source is. Make sure that your drawings are clear. Don't oversaturate with too much detail. I find that, and I fell prey to this as well as a young illustrator, was I wanted to prove I could draw everything. So a lot of times there was so much detail in the piece that it became distracting. So one thing I learned over time was draw what's necessary. The rest can fade to outline. I call it the tip of the iceberg theory, where draw enough to hint at the rest of the iceberg. Because if you try drawing the iceberg in every single panel, you're going to really oversaturate. And sometimes you have clarity problems and comprehension problemes with your story.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you know, that's just
so,
really.
So do you fall into the camp where like Tolkien, like would expound on everything? Yes. Do you want that? Do you want to steer the reader's vision into exactly what you want, or do you want just enough to let their imagination fill in the gaps?
Well, with regard to the saturating world of Tolkien, I've been accused of spending too much time with my own creations of world building, and I'll get heckled by people like, oh, come on, it's too much, you don't need that much detail. But my position has always been, if you build the world and you saturate the world, it really enhances the backdrop, because as long as you know that world very well, you can draw, let's say, the outlines of the orcs in the background. You draw one star orc in the foreground, but you need to know what kind of weapons are being used, what kind of armor is being worn. So you kind of need to know, where do the orcs get the armor? Do they make their own? Do they steal it?
Right.
What kind of weapons do they use? Do they use axes, primarily hammers? Are they well made, or are they just stolen from other cultures? Crude. And again, it helps to know that when you're going to, even if you're going to draw silhouettes of like a half a dozen orcs behind the lead orc, it's good to know all that. So you hint to that, and hopefully subliminally, the reader, looking at the panel of the lead orc running toward the camera and then a half a dozen orcs behind that lead orc, they understand from my outlines that are simplified, the silhouettes, let's say, they understand that these are crude weapons, crude armor. This is a very barbaric species, a barbaric race. And they are corrupted elves. So it's
So
important for me to do all
how would you convey that though? So if you say you haven't, you're the writer, the
Okay.
editor, and you're sending this to a artist to do rough sketches, how do you tell them that? How do you tell them, like, this is an ancient race, but it's very crude? What kind of wordage would you use?
Yeah, well, if I was writing, I was trying to get the artist to understand, I would first of all definitely talk to the artist a lot. But if in the written form, I would say in about 3 sentences, I would define.
Don't screw this up.
Don't screw this up. Yeah, no, I'd say, okay, this is an ancient corrupted race from an elven species by Sauron, by Saruman. The Uruk-hai, if it was Uruk-hai, I would explain these are more elite fighters that are going to be more muscular, more impressive physically than the average orcs, that are going to look a little bit more ape-like and maybe brutish. If they're led by an Uruk-hai, that's going to look, he's going to look more together, more prepared, a little bit more like a commando leading a ragtag gaggle of thugs, right? And I would use, I would use words that send visual cues to the artist like that. I'm glad you used orcs as an example, because you can get a little bit deeper. Most people understand because they've seen the trilogy. You can get a little bit deeper about, okay, they understand there's a difference between Uruk-hai and the regular orcs.
Yeah.
And even the orcs in Moria, which are referred to as goblins quite often, even they look different from the other orcs that we see in the landscapes, So again, writing this out, give all of the cues I mentioned, but also we spoke about this a couple of nights ago. I like to make sure that if I'm writing a script, I'm using all the 5 senses, right? Hearing, taste, touch, smell, what does the scene smell like? I mean, with orcs, that's going to be bad. What does it feel like when you see them? What are the textures? What do you hear? The clanking of the poorly cobbled together armor, the grunting, the hissing. How does their language sound? And some people might say, well, come on, Dean, that's overkill for a comic. You can't hear it, but you should be able to hear it subliminally.
You should be able to, yeah. Is it clunky? Does it have like real hard glottal starts and stops?
Yeah, exactly.
Is it like Klingon?
Does the language sound like Klingon? Is it British, and is it more Russian sound, Slavic sounding? A lot of consonants, a lot of harsh sounds, maybe Germanic in a way. It's not going to flow like French. The Elvish language is going to sound more like Mandarin or French. It's going to flow. And then visually, elves are going to be more liquid and more sophisticated. The motifs are going to be leaves and water and vines, and the intertwining designs of, let's say, the Irish Celtic design feel. And of course, Tolkien's elves are tall and lithe and noble. They're not the Keebler elves that we.
I was just going to say Keebler elves,
right? So again, I would use those types of visual cues in writing them and in drawing them, of course, too. I thought that the designers for the trilogy did a tremendous job with envisioning what the elves.
So do we have Tolkien to thank for that, for that tall, slender, not Keebler elf?
Not Keebler. I think so. I think his intention was to give Western Europe their mythology that was the equivalent of the Iliad and the Odyssey, and then the Roman Aeneid, and the classic adventures and mythologies, and he wanted the elves to be that noble race.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if you go back even further and you go into deeper Tolkien with the Silmarillion, you've got the Valar and all the noble races, the beginning of the world, and so on. But again, that brings us back full circle to what we're discussing, where it's not necessary to draw all of this as an artist, but it is helpful to know it, because you can put little visual cues that imply a deeper world. You can put designs on the shields of the orcs that, are they orcs of Saruman? Do they have the white hand on their shields? You know what I mean? Like, if you know a little bit, and it's not necessary that the reader know this, but the ones who do know will appreciate it. So if you're
but you could also be the person that introduces them to that.
Correct.